Welcome to our Spotlight video series where we talk about cutting-edge employment law issues in the news. I'm Tom Spiggle, founder of the Spiggle Law Firm. We help people who've been fired or afraid that they might be. I'm thrilled today to be joined by one of our very experienced attorneys, Louise Ryder. And Louise, we're going to be talking about, I believe, non-competes today?
Yes. So I think it's very interesting to look into the FTC earlier this year proposed a new regulation or new regulations which would prohibit non-compete clauses. And I think it's a very relevant proposed regulations, as a large number of employees in the United States do have to deal with non-compete clauses in their contracts with their employers. And they can be have a large impact on both the employee's ability to get into the competitive job market, as well as, in my view, I think it impacts the ability of employers to obtain good personnel and employees with backgrounds in their fields. So a non-compete clause, for anyone who is not aware, is where an employee essentially signs an agreement with his or her employer, which outlines, states that they cannot, after their separation from from working with that employer, that they cannot obtain employment in another field or with another employer in the same field or in the same geographic area. It essentially prohibits what type of work they can do after they leave employment there. And there have already been a series of cases and case law addressing the confines of what you can put in a non-compete clause, because if they are overly broad, they were previously prohibited. For instance, it would have to be for a set time period that's reasonable. It couldn't go too long. You can't prohibit an employee from working in a certain field for the next 10 years. It also generally needs to be limited to a geographic area and to a very specific field. And there needs to be some sort of justification for the inclusion of that non-compete clause. Nonetheless, it still does potentially decrease American workers' earnings by $250 billion to $296 billion per year. So by the FTC proposing these regulations prohibiting these non-compete clauses, it could increase American workers' earnings, and as well as provide that freedom of competition and employment. So it's a very impactful set of new regulations that I'm very much looking forward to hopefully seeing implemented. And I think it also is interesting how the proposed new regulations, assuming they are implemented, could overlap with claims that employers may try to assert against employees who leave their employment. For instance, trade secret claims. And so I will admit I have not encountered, I have not represented an employee who has been sued by an employer for violation of trade secret laws. But I do think it's interesting how there could be an overlap between those claims and prohibiting non-compete clauses, in that it could make certain that such suits are more narrowed, and that there has to be an actual clear violation of a specific confidentiality provision in an employment contract for there to be any sort of trade secret violations. So I just thought it was an interesting thought. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, well, I think it's a great topic, and I think for folks listening, a lot of people have signed non-competes. They're not even aware that they've signed, right? Because you get a bunch of paperwork. A lot of it now is electronic, right? So you're starting at the company, everybody's excited, you're excited, new job, and you're signing, just like we sign credit card agreements and all those sorts of things without reading them. and you're signing a bunch of stuff, and they're often buried within there can be a non-compete clause. So I think it's important for people who are leaving a company to double check that paperwork to see if they have a non-compete clause. And to your point, to realize that just because one is there does not mean that you are necessarily bound by it. Now, it's a little bit of a game of chicken, right? Because a lot of times employers will threaten, right, to file a lawsuit to enforce a non-compete clause, but it's expensive for both sides, for both the employee and the employer. So it can be some saber rattling. And these FTC regulations, which right now, of course, are just proposed. I mean, fingers crossed, they actually get passed in the law, but they don't ban non-competes right now. But I think even now they provide employees with an opportunity to argue back against the employer and say, hey, look, these are disfavored now. Let's see if we can come to some sort of resolution. And of course, the trade secret is an immensely complicated area and can be very costly for an employee because these cases are in federal court. And as you know, it takes a lot of attorney time, just takes a lot of legal power to litigate these cases. So it's a really serious issue. I think for the takeaway is that for employees is that there's hope. I mean, just because these issues come up doesn't mean that you are without some kind of remedy. And the FTC regulations can be right now they're not law, but they can be a helpful guide. And that you should get yourself a lawyer. You might be able to beat it back.
Absolutely.
All right, Louise, this is fascinating. I appreciate your time this morning. I will let you get to the next thing on your desk.
Thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful day as well.
You too.